The winter of 1941 was a cruel season for the Soviet Union. The world's largest nation was bleeding under the weight of invasion. Nazi Germany's Operation Barbarossa had torn through the western frontiers, leaving cities in ruin and skies full of smoke. Amid the chaos, in a small Ukrainian village near Sumy, a young man named Ivan Kozhedub watched the world burn from the cockpit of a trainer plane. He was only 21, an instructor, teaching others how to fly when the war suddenly demanded he fight. At first they told him no. "You're too valuable as a teacher," his commanders said, but Ivan's heart wasn't built for classrooms. Every day he watched younger men fly west and never return. The urge to defend his homeland, to prove that Soviet pilots could rule the sky, burned inside him stronger than fear itself. Finally, in 1943, his chance arrived. He was assigned to the 240th Fighter Aviation Regiment, equipped with the Lavochkin La-5, a rugged Soviet fighter that roared like thunder and smelled of oil and hope. His first missions were defensive patrols along the Kursk front. The air there was alive with gunfire. German FW-190s and Bf-109s swept through the clouds like steel vultures. Ivan's hands trembled the first time he saw their silhouettes glinting in the sunlight, but when he squeezed the trigger, the fear vanished. His bullets found a Messerschmitt's engine, and the German aircraft exploded into a fireball that painted the clouds red. "One for the motherland," he whispered. That first victory changed everything. Confidence replaced hesitation. Discipline sharpened into instinct. Each day, Ivan climbed into the sky, not as a boy but as a hunter. The Lavochkin became an extension of his soul. He could feel its heartbeat through the stick. When the sun rose, the Soviets called it Ivan's weather. By mid-1943, the tide of war was shifting. The Battle of Kursk raged below, tanks grinding steel against steel, but above them, pilots like Kozhedub fought invisible wars of seconds and shadows. His regiment escorted bombers, intercepted German reconnaissance planes, and dueled with aces whose names were whispered with respect and dread. Each encounter tested his courage. Each mission wrote another scar across his heart. One morning the squadron scrambled after reports of a German raid near Belgorod. Clouds hung low, the light grey and cold. As they climbed through the mist, tracers cut across the sky. "Contact, 12 o'clock high," Ivan shouted. He rolled hard, the G-forces crushing his chest, and fired a short burst. A German plane burst into flames, spiraling toward the earth. Two more appeared behind him. He dove, the engines screaming, smoke swirling past his canopy. He pulled up at the last second, reversed, and shot both enemies before they could react. It was over in less than 30 seconds. His comrades called him calm, almost unnervingly so. While others shouted on the radio, Ivan spoke in a steady voice, giving orders like a man born to command. Soon he became the unit's top scorer, but fame meant nothing to him. He fought not for glory, but for peace, peace that seemed so far away in the sky filled with fire. In 1944, he transitioned to the Lavochkin La-7, a faster, deadlier machine. Its twin cannons spat flames with terrifying precision. Ivan's flight logs filled with victories, 30, then 40, then 50 kills. His legend spread through the front lines. Even German pilots began to know his name. They called him the Ghost of the Eastern Sky. There was one mission that nearly ended it all. Over Warsaw, while escorting Soviet bombers, Kozhedub's formation encountered a swarm of German fighters. The air turned into chaos. Tracers zipped past like angry fireflies. Ivan's plane was hit, smoke poured from the engine, instruments flickered. He could have turned back, but retreat was never in his vocabulary. Instead, he climbed higher, inverted, and attacked from above. His cannon shells tore through two enemy aircraft in a single burst. A third tried to ram him, but he rolled under it so low that his wingtip brushed the bomber's wake. He landed that day with holes in his fuselage and a grin on his face. Each time he survived, it felt less like luck and more like destiny. "A pilot doesn't think," he once said, "he feels." His sense of timing became supernatural. Comrades joked that he could smell the enemy before seeing them. He led patrols deep behind German lines, striking supply convoys and airbases. He flew day and night, through snowstorms and lightning, refusing to rest. But inside him, something changed. Every victory carried the weight of those who never came back. He often stood silent by the wreckage of fallen friends, staring at the twisted metal that once sang through the sky. War was turning heroes into ghosts faster than history could remember their names. By autumn 1944, Kozhedub had shot down more than 50 German aircraft. His reputation reached Moscow, and even Stalin knew his name. The government awarded him the title Hero of the Soviet Union twice, yet he still returned to the front. Awards meant little when the war wasn't over. One of his most daring encounters came late that year near the Oder River. His squadron spotted a formation of American P-51 Mustangs, Allied aircraft that had mistakenly crossed into Soviet airspace. They mistook Ivan's group for Germans and opened fire. In seconds, friends had become foes. Ivan hesitated, unwilling to shoot back. But when bullets tore through his wings, survival took over. He rolled behind one Mustang, fired a short burst, and saw it tumble in smoke. Another followed. Only later did he learn they were Americans. It haunted him, though the incident was buried by officials. Winter returned, and with it came the final push toward Berlin. The sky was heavy with snow, but the missions continued. Ivan's Lavachkin carried the scars of countless battles, patched holes, faded paint, a lucky star scratched on the fuselage. Every mark told a story. Every flight felt like the last. As the Red Army advanced westward, the Germans fought with desperation. Jet aircraft, the revolutionary Mi-262s, appeared in the skies, machines faster than anything the world had seen. Most Soviet pilots couldn't even reach them, but Ivan Kozhedub did. One afternoon in early 1945, he spotted a silver streak cutting through the clouds. The jet dived on a group of Soviet bombers, its cannons flashing. Ivan turned sharply, pulling every ounce of power from his engine, and got behind the Mi-262. At that speed, even a heartbeat's hesitation could mean death. He fired. 2 shells struck the jet's engine. Flames erupted. The German pilot belayed out just before the explosion. It was the first time a piston-engine fighter had downed a jet. The squadron erupted in disbelief over the radio. "You hit a jet. You actually hit a jet." Ivan only replied, "He flew too low." By the time the war neared its end, Kozhedub's score stood at 62 confirmed kills. 62 enemies who never saw him coming. He had flown more than 300 combat missions and survived them all. To many, he was a ghost, untouchable, untamed, a man who had mastered both his machine and his fear. But even as victory drew closer, Ivan knew the sky would never feel the same again. The war had given him wings, but it had taken his innocence. Each sunrise reminded him of those who never landed. When the Red Army finally raised its flag over Berlin, Kozhedub was still in the air, patrolling a sky that was finally quiet. For the first time in years, he saw the clouds without smoke. The silence was deafening. He returned to his airfield to find his comrades waiting. Some cheered, some cried. Ivan stepped down from his Lavachkin and simply looked around. The world was still broken, but alive. He touched the wing of his aircraft and whispered, "We made it." When the guns of Europe finally fell silent in May 1945, the skies seemed empty to those who had lived their lives among the clouds. For Ivan Kozhedub, victory felt strange. He had survived hundreds of missions, defied impossible odds, and become the most successful Allied fighter ace of World War II. 62 confirmed victories, no losses. Yet as the world celebrated, he felt the quiet weight of everything he had seen. The celebrations in Moscow were grand. Flags waved, orchestras played, and banners carried the faces of heroes. Ivan stood among them, uniform crisp, medals gleaming under the sunlight. When he walked through the crowd, people whispered his name with reverence, Kozhedub, the pilot who never fell. But he didn't smile much. His thoughts wandered to the airfields left behind, to the young men who never came home. For every medal pinned on his chest, there was a name missing from the parade. After the victory, the Soviet Air Force didn't let him rest. The world was already shifting toward a new kind of war, one fought not just with tanks and planes, but with power, ideology, and fear. Kozhedub, with his unmatched experience, became an instructor and later commander. He trained a new generation of pilots, men who would one day fly jets instead of propeller-driven fighters. In 1946, he joined the Zhukovsky Air Force Academy. There, surrounded by the best minds in aviation, Ivan learned to master the science behind what had once been pure instinct. For him, the transition from the roar of his Lavachkin to the cold precision of jet engines felt like stepping into another era. He often told his students, "A plane may change, but the sky never does. It will always demand respect." The Soviet Union entered the jet age with haste, building aircraft that could climb higher and faster than anything before. Ivan flew many of them, the MiG-9, then the MiG-15, sleek silver shape slicing through the air like blades. For a man who had once fought with wood and steel, these machines felt almost alive. The speed thrilled him, but he never forgot the lessons of the war: patience, control, awareness. He reminded his trainees that courage without discipline was suicide in the air. By the early 1950s, a new war was brewing, this time far from Europe. The Korean peninsula had become the center of global tension, and Soviet pilots quietly joined the conflict, flying under Chinese and North Korean markings. Officially, the Soviet Union denied their involvement, but the truth lived in the skies. Among those sent to advise and lead was Ivan Kozhedub. Though he rarely flew combat sorties himself, he commanded units that engaged American F-86 Sabres in fierce dogfights over the Yalu River. The jet duels were unlike anything from the last war: no more propellers, no more turning fights that lasted minutes. Now battles were decided in seconds at near supersonic speed. Ivan, watching from the command post, studied the tactics, guided his men, and occasionally took the controls himself when the need arose. One mission became legend among his comrades. A MiG pilot returned from combat, shaken but alive, his plane riddled with bullet holes. "The commander's voice kept me steady," he said. "He told me where to turn, when to climb, how to live." The commander was Kozhedub. Though the details of his service in Korea remained secret for decades, his influence was undeniable. He helped shape the tactics that would define Soviet jet warfare for the next generation. For his leadership, he was promoted to Major General, and later to Air Marshal, one of the few wartime aces to rise so high. Yet for all the rank and prestige, Ivan remained humble. He preferred the hangar to the office, the engines growled to the sound of speeches. He often visited training bases, standing on runways as young pilots took off into the dawn. He watched their silhouettes fade into the sky and thought of 1943, of the day he first took his Lavachkin into battle. He never married the sky completely, but he never left it either. Aviation was in his blood, and he carried its pulse until his last day. He became a national symbol, appearing in newspapers, schools, and parades. But whenever people called him a hero, he would simply shake his head and say, "The real heroes are the ones who didn't come back." In the 1960s and 70s, Kozhedub's legend grew beyond borders. Even Western historians recognized his skill. To this day, few fighter pilots in history have equaled his record without being shot down once. His last 7, restored and gleaming, became a museum piece, a silent relic of a time when courage was measured in altitude and seconds. He continued serving in the Soviet Air Force until 1971, overseeing advanced jet programs and contributing to aerial defense systems. When he finally retired, it was with the same quiet dignity that had marked his entire life. He lived modestly in Moscow, often visiting air shows and veteran gatherings. The sight of planes still made his eyes shine. In his later years, he spoke rarely about combat, but when he did, his words carried the weight of experience. "A pilot," he said once, "does not fight to kill. He fights to survive, to protect. The sky is not a place for hatred, it's a place for courage." He passed away in 1991, the same year the Soviet Union itself dissolved. As history closed one chapter, the man who had once ruled its skies faded quietly into legend. His funeral was attended by generations of pilots, some who had flown with him, others who had only heard stories whispered in flight schools. Fighter jets roared overhead in salute, their wings glinting in the sunlight. For a moment, the sound echoed across the city, as if the sky itself was saying goodbye. To this day, in airbases across Russia and Ukraine, young cadets still learn his name. His portrait hangs in academies, not as a symbol of war, but of endurance. They study his missions, his calmness under fire, and his belief that skill mattered more than speed, discipline more than fame. And sometimes, when old veterans gather under fading banners, they tell the story of the man who never fell, the boy from a small Ukrainian village who learned to fly, who faced the might of the Luftwaffe, and lived to teach others how to dream among the clouds. Ivan Kozhedub's story isn't just about victory, it's about resilience, the quiet fire of those who refuse to surrender even when surrounded by chaos. He fought for his homeland, but his legacy belongs to the entire world, to everyone who has ever looked at the sky and felt the pull of something greater than fear. When people ask what kind of man he was, those who knew him say only this: he was the kind who never looked down, only forward into the wind, where the horizon waited. And that is where his story still lives, in the endless sky that he once ruled, and in the hearts of those who dare to follow him there.